Breaking: Britain's Chancellor just got reported to the nation's ethics watchdog, not for a minor slip, not for a mistaken judgment, for allegedly lying to the entire country about the state of its finances. Tonight, Rachel Reeves stands accused of the most audacious deception in modern British political history, a sustained campaign of falsehoods that paved the way for a £30 billion tax raid on working people. The walls are closing in, and what's unfolding right now could shatter trust in this government forever. If you want the full breakdown of how this scandal exploded, hit subscribe now and stay with us, because what we're about to reveal will shock you. Here's what sparked the crisis no one saw coming. At exactly 11:47 p.m. on Saturday, November 30th, 2025, a letter was delivered, not to Downing Street, not to Parliament, but to the desk of Sir Laurie Magnus, the Prime Minister's independent advisor on ministerial standards. The sender, Nigel Farage. The target, Chancellor Rachel Reeves. The accusation, a deliberate breach of the ministerial code, the sacred rules that bind every government minister to honesty, transparency, and truth. In the cold digital glow of newsrooms across London, editors froze. Political journalists refreshed their screens in disbelief, because this wasn't just another opposition attack. This was a formal ethics complaint backed by evidence, time-stamped, and impossible to ignore. And in the silence that followed, one question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Did the Chancellor of the Exchequer lie to justify the biggest tax increase in a generation? To understand how we arrived at this moment, you have to go back to the election promises, back to the budget, back to the black hole that may never have existed. It was July 4, 2024, when Labour swept into power with a landslide victory. Sir Keir Starmer stood outside Number 10 and promised a government of integrity, of service, of trust. Rachel Reeves, Britain's first ever female chancellor, stood beside him, radiating confidence. She had made a solemn vow to the British people in Labour's manifesto: no tax rises on working people, no income tax increases, no national insurance hikes for employees, no VAT rises. It was a promise carved into the foundation of their campaign. But within weeks, the narrative began to shift. Whispers started emerging from the Treasury, anonymous briefings to journalists, carefully planted stories in the financial press, all saying the same thing: the public finances were in catastrophic shape. The previous Conservative government, they claimed, had left behind a fiscal disaster, a hidden crisis, a black hole so deep that tough decisions, painful decisions, would be necessary. By late October, the whispers had become a roar. Treasury officials were briefing openly about a £22 billion shortfall. Some reports suggested it could be as high as £40 billion. The language was apocalyptic. The public finances were collapsing. The nation was on the brink. Rachel Reeves herself took to the airwaves. Interview after interview, speech after speech, she painted the same grim picture. Britain was in trouble. The Conservatives had wrecked the economy. Tax rises were not a choice, they were an unavoidable necessity. On November 4th, she stood before the cameras and delivered what insiders described as an extraordinary address. Her face was grave. Her tone was urgent. She spoke of challenges in the world that anyone could see. She spoke of difficult forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility, the independent watchdog that oversees Britain's fiscal policy. She was preparing the ground, and on November 27th, she delivered her budget: £30 billion in tax increases, the largest tax raid in modern British history. National insurance contributions for employers up, capital gains tax up, inheritance tax on family farms slashed, reliefs. The burden fell everywhere. Working people, the very group Labour had promised to protect, would feel the squeeze. Businesses warned of job losses. Economists predicted slower growth. Pensioners braced for impact. But Reeves was resolute. This wasn't a choice, she insisted. This was necessity. The Ober forecasts had left her no room to maneuver. Britain's fiscal position was dire, except it wasn't. Because on Friday, November 29th, the truth began to leak out. The Office for Budget Responsibility published its full correspondence with the Treasury. A detailed, time-stamped account of every conversation, every forecast, every projection shared with the Chancellor in the run-up to the budget. And buried in those documents was a bombshell. On October 31st, just days before Reeves began her final push to justify tax rises, the Ober had delivered its latest forecast. There was no black hole. There was no fiscal crisis. In fact, the Chancellor had a surplus, £4.2 billion of headroom, money to spare. The deficit that officials had briefed about just weeks earlier, gone, evaporated. It had never materialized. Rachel Reeves knew this. She had seen the numbers. She had been told directly by Richard Hughes, the OBER chairman, that Britain's fiscal position had actually improved. Productivity forecasts had been downgraded. Yes, but they'd been offset by higher tax receipts and better inflation numbers. The fiscal position was stable. And yet, for days afterward, she continued to claim the opposite. On November 4th, for days after receiving the OBER's upgraded forecast, Reeves stood in Parliament and suggested that tax rises were inevitable. Because the OBER's projections were worse than expected. She knew they weren't. Treasury officials continued to brief journalists about the scale of the fiscal emergency, about the collapse in the public finances, about the impossible choices facing the Chancellor. None of it was true. By the weekend, the political fallout was catastrophic. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch was the first to go public. On Sunday morning talk shows, she didn't hold back. The Chancellor lied to the public for months to justify tax hikes, she said, her voice sharp with fury. She called an emergency press conference, told everyone the finances were terrible, and now we know the OBER told her the complete opposite. She demanded Reeves resign. The Liberal Democrats piled on. Even some within Labour's own ranks began to whisper their discomfort. The Times reported that cabinet ministers, including senior figures close to Starmer, felt they'd been misled. One anonymous minister told the paper, "At no point were the cabinet told about the reality of the OBER forecasts. Even Sir Keir Starmer couldn't escape the blast radius because on Sunday, Rachel Reeves confirmed what many suspected. The Prime Minister knew. He had seen the OBER numbers. He had signed off on the strategy. Their relationship," she said, "was a partnership. If she fell, he would fall with her." And that's when Nigel Farage made his move. The Reform UK leader had been circling for days, watching the scandal unfold, waiting for the right moment. And late Saturday night, he struck. His letter to Sir Laurie Magnus was surgical, methodical. It cited paragraph 1.6 of the Ministerial Code, the section that demands ministers provide accurate and truthful information to Parliament and the public. It laid out the timeline. It quoted the OBER correspondence. It presented the contradictions. And it called for a formal investigation. Rachel Reeves conducted a sustained public and media campaign, Farage wrote, portraying the public finances as being in a state of collapse in order to prepare political ground for approximately £30 billion of tax increases. He argued that the OBER's own documents proved the tax rises were discretionary policy choices, not unavoidable fiscal necessity, and he demanded answers. The stakes couldn't be higher, because if Farage is right, if Reeves did knowingly mislead the public, this isn't just a political scandal, it's a betrayal of the Ministerial Code, a violation of the sacred contract between government and governed, a lie that cost working families billions, and the ethics watchdog now has no choice but to respond. Sunday, December 1st, 2025, Britain wakes to a media firestorm. Every front page screams the same story. Every headline cuts deeper than the last. The Daily Mail. Farage, Reeves must face sleaze probe over budget lies. The Telegraph, Reeves faces ethics inquiry over budget lies. Metro, Reeves, I didn't lie. The Times, Ministers, Reeves misled us over hole in finances. The Nation is reeling. Breakfast tables across the country fall silent as families read the details. In living rooms from Cornwall to Northumberland, people stare at their screens in disbelief. Coffee grows cold. Toast sits uneaten, because this isn't some Westminster bubble story about expenses or second homes. This is about trust, about honesty, about whether the government deliberately deceived the British people to justify raiding their pockets. Bym. Social media is ablaze. Twitter, now X, is flooded with rage. The hashtag Reeves resign is trending within minutes. Furious voters post screenshots of Labour's manifesto promises alongside clips of Reeves announcing tax rises. The hypocrisy is laid bare in real time. They promise not to touch working people. One user writes, "They lied to our faces and then emptied our wallets." Another posts, "She knew there was no black hole. She knew, and she lied anyway." The comment sections of every news outlet are overflowing. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. "I voted Labour because I believed them," writes a nurse from Manchester. "I feel like a fool." A small business owner from Yorkshire. "My employer national insurance just went up because of a lie. How many jobs will this cost?" The Conservative Party wastes no time weaponizing the scandal. Bym. They've launched a petition, sackreevessnow.com. Within hours, more than 40,000 people have signed. The numbers keep climbing. 50,000, 60,000. The rage is spreading like wildfire. Kemi Badenoch appears on every morning news program. Her message is consistent, brutal, effective. The Chancellor raised taxes to pay for welfare, she says on Sky News, her eyes locked on the camera. The only thing that was unfunded was the welfare payments she made, and she's doing it on the backs of people who are working very hard and getting poorer. She pauses, lets the words land. If the Prime Minister doesn't have the backbone to sack her, he is finished. The Liberal Democrats join the chorus. Ed Davey calls it a catastrophic breach of public trust. The SNP demands an immediate parliamentary inquiry. Even the Green Party questions whether the Chancellor can continue in her role. But it's the Conservative demand that cuts deepest. Shadow Chancellor Alex Burghardt fires off a letter to Starmer that lands like a grenade. This is a serious breach of trust with Parliament and with the British people, he writes. The Chancellor must attend Parliament tomorrow and explain the extent to which she misled the public. He doesn't stop there. The Tories formally asked the Financial Conduct Authority to investigate Reeves for possible market manipulation. The allegation is explosive. By painting a false picture of Britain's fiscal position, she may have illegally influenced financial markets, bond traders, currency speculators, pension funds, all making decisions based on information the Chancellor knew to be untrue. David Morrison, senior market analyst at Trade Nation, doesn't mince words. The FCA should investigate, he tells the Daily Mail. Former Bank of England interest rate setter Andrew's sentence is even blunter. She's guilty of duping us about her discussions with the Ober. Annie Haldane, former chief economist at the Bank of England, calls for a full inquiry, regulatory or parliamentary. The economic establishment is turning on her. But the most damaging voices aren't coming from the opposition, they're coming from inside Labour itself. By mid-morning, The Times drops another bombshell. Cabinet ministers are furious. Not just backbenchers, not just junior ministers. Cabinet-level figures, people who sit around the same table as Reeves every week, feel betrayed. One senior minister, speaking anonymously, tells the newspaper, "Why did Keir and Rachel allow the country to believe for so long that we would break our manifesto by putting up income tax by 2 pence when they would have known that wasn't true?" Another cabinet source is even more scathing. "The budget has been a disaster from start to finish. The whispers are growing louder. The unity is fracturing. Labour MPs are beginning to panic because they're the ones who have to go back to their constituencies. They're the ones who have to face angry voters demanding answers. They're the ones who campaigned on that manifesto promise not to raise taxes on working people. And now they look like liars." In constituency offices across the country, phones are ringing off the hook. Emails flood in by the hundreds. Furious constituents demanding to know how their MP could support this, how they could vote for a budget built on deception. Labour MPs don't have answers. Some tried to defend Reeves. The fiscal situation was challenging, they say, reading from the party line. Difficult decisions had to be made. But the voters aren't buying it anymore. Not when the Ober correspondence is public. Not when the timeline is clear. Not when the numbers speak for themselves. By noon, the pressure becomes unbearable. Sir Keir Starmer is scheduled to give a speech on welfare reform at AM. It's supposed to be a major policy announcement. A chance to set the agenda. To move forward with Labour's vision for Britain. Instead, it becomes a hostage situation. Starmer stands at the podium, flanked by Union Jacks, trying desperately to talk about disability benefits and employment programs. But the journalists aren't interested. The first question out of the gate, "Prime Minister, did your Chancellor lie to the British people?" Starmer's jaw tightens. The Chancellor has been clear about the fiscal challenges we inherited, but the Ober said there was no black hole. Did she mislead Parliament? Rachel Reeves has acted with integrity throughout. Will you sack her? The questions come faster, harsher, more aggressive. Do you stand by your Chancellor? Did you personally approve the strategy to exaggerate the fiscal crisis? Have you broken your manifesto promise? Starmer tries to hold the line. He defends Reeves. He insists the budget was necessary. He claims the fiscal headroom calculations are more complex than the opposition suggests. But his voice lacks conviction. His body language betrays him. He shifts his weight, glances at his notes. The confidence that defined his election victory is gone, and everyone watching knows it. The speech that was supposed to relaunch Labour's agenda becomes a car crash in slow motion. By the time it ends, the damage is done. Clips flood social media within minutes. Starmer stammering, Starmer deflecting, Starmer unable to answer basic questions about whether his government lied. The optics are catastrophic, and in Parliament, The storm is about to break wide open. Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle has granted an urgent question. Tomorrow morning, a Treasury Minister will be dragged before the House of Commons to answer for the Chancellor's conduct. Reeves herself won't attend. She's conveniently scheduled to be in a different part of the country. But that only makes things worse. It looks like cowardice, like she's running from accountability. The opposition smells blood. Conservative MPs are preparing their questions. Lib Dems are sharpening their knives. Even Labour backbenchers are quietly drafting their own concerns, because Parliament doesn't like being lied to, and if the evidence shows that Reeves knowingly misled the House, if she stood at the dispatch box and said things she knew weren't true, the consequences could be seismic. By evening, the political class is in chaos. WhatsApp groups buzz with speculation. Will Starmer sack her? Will she resign? Can Labour survive this? Political journalists work their sources frantically, trying to get a read on what happens next, and all the while, Sir Lawrie Magnus sits in his office, reviewing Nigel Farage's letter. The ethics watchdog has confirmed receipt. His team is studying the allegations, examining the evidence, weighing the threshold for a formal investigation. Magnus has the power to launch an inquiry without seeking permission from the Prime Minister, but he must inform Starmer before doing so. The question now is not if he will investigate, it's when. Because the evidence is public. The timeline is clear. The ministerial code is explicit. Ministers must provide accurate and truthful information to Parliament and the public. They must be as open as possible. And Rachel Reeves, by her own admission, knew there was no fiscal black hole when she claimed there was. The walls are closing in. The scandal is no longer containable. And tomorrow, the reckoning begins. Monday, December 2nd, 2025. Dawn breaks over Westminster, but there's no warmth in the light. The sky is slate gray, heavy, oppressive, as if the weather itself knows what's coming. Bym. Camera crews are already setting up outside Parliament. Satellite trucks line the streets. Journalists clutch coffee cups and rehearse their pieces to camera. The air crackles with anticipation. Today, someone will have to answer. Inside number 11 Downing Street, the Chancellor's residence, Rachel Reeves sits alone at her desk. The room is quiet. Too quiet. Her hands rest on a folder marked Over Correspondence. She hasn't opened it. She doesn't need to. She knows every word by heart. Her phone buzzes. Another message from a Labour MP. Another expression of concern. Another polite way of saying, "You're sinking the party." She doesn't reply. Instead, she stares at the television on the wall. BBC News is running a montage. Her own words played back to her. Clips from October, from early November. Her voice confident, urgent, warning of fiscal disaster. The challenges facing our economy are clear to anyone. The Ober forecast has made the situation even more difficult. We must make tough choices to fix the foundations. And then the screen cuts to Richard Hughes, the Ober chairman. In his testimony before the Treasury Committee, his voice is calm, clinical, devastating. We informed the Chancellor on October 31st that the fiscal position had improved. The previous deficit projection had been eliminated. There was, in fact, £4.2 billion of headroom. The contrast is crushing. Reeves reaches for her tea. It's gone cold. Across London, in his Reform UK headquarters, Nigel Farage is anything but quiet. He's on the phone with LBC Radio, his voice booming through speakers in cars across Britain. Commuters listen. Taxi drivers turn up the volume. Office workers pause mid-breakfast. This isn't about party politics, Farage says, his tone grave but energized. This is about whether a chancellor can lie to the British people to justify the biggest tax raid in a generation. The ministerial code exists for a reason. It's not decoration. It's the bedrock of honest government. The host interrupts. But the chancellor says she didn't lie. Of course she says that. Farage cuts in. What else is she going to say? But the evidence is there. Black and white. Time stomped. The Ober told her there was no black hole on October 31st. 4 days later, she stood in Parliament and suggested the opposite. That's not a misunderstanding. That's deliberate deception. He pauses, lets the words hang, and Sir Lawrie Magnus knows it. The switchboard lights up. Caller after caller. The nation wants answers. By 9:30 a.m. Parliament is packed. The public gallery is full. Journalists cram into the press box. MPs file into the chamber, their faces tight with tension. The atmosphere is electric. Dangerous. Treasury Minister James Murray, sent in Reeves' place, takes his seat on the government front bench. He looks pale, nervous. This is a hospital pass of the highest order. Speaker Lindsay Hoyle calls the House to order, urgent question, to ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer to make a statement on the Office for Budget Responsibility. Correspondence relating to pre-budget fiscal forecasts. Murray rises slowly, adjusts his papers, begins reading from a prepared statement. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor has been clear that this government inherited the worst fiscal position since the Second World War. Groans erupt from the opposition benches. Order. Hoyle barks. Murray continues. The Ober forecast process is complex. While headline figures may suggest improved headroom, the underlying fiscal pressures. Kemi Badenoch is on her feet before he finishes. Her voice cuts through the chamber like a blade. Mr. Speaker, the minister can spin all he likes, but the facts are clear. The Chancellor told this House repeatedly that the fiscal situation required immediate tax rises. The Ober has now confirmed they told her the exact opposite. Will the government admit that the British people were deliberately misled? Murray fumbles his response. The Chancellor acted in good faith based on the full range of economic data. That is not an answer. Badenoch thunders. Yes or no? Did the Chancellor know on October 31st that there was no fiscal black hole? The chamber goes silent. Every eye is on Murray. He swallows hard. The Ober correspondence speaks for itself. Yes or no? The fiscal situation required careful management. The chamber erupts. Labour MPs shift uncomfortably. Conservative MPs roar their disapproval. The Speaker struggles to restore order, but the damage is done. Murray can't defend the indefensible. He can't answer a simple question because the answer would destroy his Chancellor. Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesperson Sarah Olney rises next. Her tone is colder, more measured, somehow more devastating. Mr. Speaker, the ministerial code is not optional. Paragraph 1.6 states clearly that ministers must give accurate and truthful information to Parliament. The Ober told the Chancellor on October 31st that the fiscal forecast had improved. On November 4th, the Chancellor told this House the forecast made the situation even more difficult. Those two statements cannot both be true. Will the minister confirm whether the Prime Minister has referred this matter to the Independent Advisor on Ministerial Standards? Murray hesitates. The government is confident that all statements made to this House were. That is not what I asked. Olney interrupts. Has the Prime Minister referred this matter to Sir Laurie Magnus? The government will respond to all formal inquiries through the appropriate channels. The chamber descends into chaos. MPs are shouting, pointing. The Speaker's voice is drowned out, because Murray has just confirmed it. There's been no self-referral, no voluntary investigation. The government is circling the wagons, hoping this goes away, but it won't. Backbench after backbench rises. Conservative MPs demand resignation. SNP MPs call for a vote of no confidence. Even some Labour members ask pointed questions about fiscal transparency. The session lasts 90 brutal minutes, and when it finally ends, Murray stumbles from the chamber looking shell-shocked. He's been fed to the wolves outside Parliament. The press is waiting. Reporters mob every MP who emerges. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted over one another. Should the Chancellor resign? Do you believe she lied? Will Labour MPs support a confidence vote? Most dug their heads and hurry past. But a few stop. A few speak. Former Labour Minister Chris Bryant, normally a party loyalist, is unusually candid. The optics are terrible, he tells Sky News. If the evidence shows the Chancellor knew there was no black hole and said otherwise, that's very serious. Very serious indeed. Conservative MP David Davis is less diplomatic. This is the biggest political deception since the Iraq War dossier. The Chancellor must go. If she doesn't resign, the Prime Minister must sack her. If he doesn't sack her, he's complicit. And then, just afternoon, something shifts. Sir Laurie Magnus issues a statement. It's brief, clinical, but it changes everything. Following receipt of a formal complaint regarding the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I can confirm that I am reviewing the matter to determine whether the threshold for investigation under the Ministerial Code has been met. I will advise the Prime Minister of my conclusions in due course. 29 words, but they land like a bomb, because Magnus doesn't dismiss the complaint out of hand. He doesn't say it's frivolous or politically motivated. He says he's reviewing it. He's taking it seriously. The ethics watchdog is circling. Within minutes, Number 10 issues a response. It's defensive, urgent, desperate. The Prime Minister has full confidence in the Chancellor. The government inherited a dire fiscal situation and has acted responsibly to restore economic stability. But confidence doesn't mean much anymore. Not when your Chancellor is under formal ethics review. Not when the evidence is public. Not when your own backbenchers are whispering about leadership challenges. BYPM. Rachel Reeves finally breaks her silence. She agrees to an emergency interview with BBC's political editor Chris Mason. The cameras are set up in a government office. Harsh lighting, no friendly backdrop, just Reeves in a dark suit, sitting rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Mason doesn't ease her in. "Chancellor, did you lie to the British people about the state of the public finances?" Reeves' eyes harden. "I absolutely did not. The fiscal situation we inherited was serious. The Ober forecast is one element of a much wider economic picture, but the Ober told you on October 31st there was no black hole. 4 days later, you suggested to Parliament the forecast had worsened. How do you explain that?" The productivity downgrade represented £16 billion of fiscal pressure, but the Ober chairman says that downgrade was offset by higher revenues. The net position improved. "You knew that." Reeves pauses. Her jaw tightens. "I acted in good faith based on the full economic context." "That's not an answer," Mason presses. "Yes or no? Did you know on October 31st that the fiscal forecast had improved?" Silence for 3 excruciating seconds. Reeves says nothing. Her face is a mask, but her eyes betray her. Finally, "The fiscal rules are complex, Chancellor. With respect, it's a simple question." Another pause. Then, quietly, almost defiantly, "I made the decisions I believe were right for the country." It's not a denial. It's not an admission. It's the sound of a politician drowning. Mason moves in for the kill. "Will you resign?" "No." "Do you accept you've lost the trust of the British people?" "I accept this is a difficult moment. But I'm focused on delivering economic stability." Even cabinet ministers say they feel misled. "How can you continue?" Reeves stands abruptly. "I think we're done here." The interview ends. But the clip will play on loop for days. The refusal to answer. The defensive body language. The abrupt exit. It's the image of a chancellor in free-fall.by evening. The final blow lands. The Sun publishes leaked WhatsApp messages from a Labour cabinet minister. The identity is redacted, but the message is clear. "We can't keep defending this. The numbers don't lie. She knew. We all know she knew. This is going to sink us if we don't act." Another message from a different minister. "Keir needs to cut her loose before she takes us all down. The cabinet is fractured. The party is in revolt." And in his office at number 10, Sir Keir Starmer stares at a political crisis that's spiraling beyond his control. He trusted Reeves, backed her strategy, signed off on the budget approach, and now they're both drowning together. Outside, in the cold December darkness, protesters have gathered, hundreds of them, holding signs. "Reeves lied. People died. Sack the liar Chancellor." Labour's broken promise. Their chants echo through the night. "Out! Out! Out!" And somewhere in the shadows, Nigel Farage watches, waiting, because he knows what comes next. Sir Lowry Magnus will investigate. The evidence is too strong to ignore, the ministerial code too clear, and when that investigation concludes, when the ethics advisor delivers his verdict, one of two things will happen. Either Rachel Reeves will be cleared, and Labour will limp on, wounded and distrusted, or she'll be found in breach of the ministerial code, and then she'll have no choice but to resign. Either way, the damage is done. The trust is shattered, and British politics will never be the same. Tuesday, December 3rd, 2025. The morning after feels different, quieter somehow, as if the nation has exhausted itself shouting and now sits in stunned silence, trying to process what just happened. The newspapers are still brutal, the headlines still scream, but there's a subtle shift in tone. Less fury, more melancholy. The realization slowly settling in that something fundamental has broken. In kitchens across Britain, people sip their tea and stare at nothing in particular. A builder in Newcastle leans against his van, scrolling through his phone, shaking his head. A teacher in Bristol walks to work, headphones in, but she's not really listening to the music. A pensioner in Cardiff sits in his armchair, the television on but muted, just watching the images flicker past. They're all thinking the same thing. They lied to us. Not alleged, not accused, not spinning the facts or putting the best gloss on a difficult situation. They lied, and it wasn't a small lie, not an exaggeration, not a mistake made under pressure. It was a systematic, sustained campaign of deception designed to justify taking £30 billion from people who were promised they'd be protected: working people, families, small businesses, the very people Labour had sworn to stand up for. The promise was made, the votes were cast, the trust was given, and then it was betrayed. There's something particularly painful about political betrayal. It's not like being lied to by a stranger. It's worse, because you believed, you hoped, you invested something precious, your faith in the possibility of better governance, and when that faith is shattered, it doesn't just make you angry. It makes you cynical. In Parliament, the Tuesday morning sessions proceed with an eerie calm. MPs debate agricultural subsidies. Someone asks a question about transport infrastructure. The machinery of government grinds on, but everyone knows the real story is happening elsewhere. In Sir Laurie Magnus's office, the ethics investigation is underway. Documents are being reviewed. Timelines cross-referenced. The Ober correspondence laid out alongside Reeves' public statements, interview transcripts, Treasury briefings to the press. The evidence is methodical, undeniable, damning. October 31st. Ober informs Chancellor that fiscal forecast has improved. No deficit. £4.2 billion headroom. November 4th. Chancellor tells Parliament that Ober forecasts have made the situation even more difficult. November 5th. Treasury officials brief journalists about a £22 billion black hole. November 8th. Chancellor repeats warnings of fiscal collapse in media interviews. November 27th. Budget delivered. £30 billion in tax rises justified by fiscal emergency. November 29th. Ober correspondence published. Truth exposed. The timeline doesn't lie. And Magnus knows it. He's a careful man. Methodical. Not given to political theatrics. But he also understands what's at stake. The ministerial code isn't a suggestion. It's the foundation of honest government. If ministers can lie without consequence, the entire system collapses into cynicism and corruption. His report is nearly complete, and the conclusion is inescapable, but he won't rush it. He'll take his time, do it properly, because when he delivers his verdict, it must be unimpeachable. Inside number 10, the mood is funereal. Sir Keir Starmer holds a private meeting with his closest advisors. The door is closed. Voices are low. No minutes are taken. They discuss scenarios, options, damage control. If Magnus finds Reeves in breach of the code, she'll have to go. There's no way around it. The question is whether Starmer can survive her fall. Some advisors argue he should get ahead of it. Sack her now. Take control of the narrative. Show leadership. Others warn that would look like panic. Like guilt. Better to wait for Magnus's report, then act decisively. But there's a third option no one wants to say aloud. What if the public decides Starmer is just as culpable? What if they conclude he knew all along? That this wasn't just Reeves' lie, it was their lie? Because she said it herself, didn't she? On that Sunday interview. Their relationship is a partnership. He knew the Ober numbers. He approved the strategy. If she falls, she might drag him down with her. One advisor finally voices what everyone's thinking. Prime Minister, we need to be prepared for the possibility that this doesn't end with just a chancellor. Starmer says nothing, just stares out the window at the grey London sky, across the city, in broadcast studios and newsrooms. The political commentators are already writing the epitaph. This is Labour's Iraq dossier moment, says one veteran journalist on Newsnight. A deliberate exaggeration of a threat to justify a predetermined policy. And just like with Iraq, the damage to public trust will last for generations. Another on Channel 4. What's remarkable is how avoidable this was. If Reeves had simply been honest, said the fiscal situation was manageable, but she wanted to raise taxes to invest in public services, that would have been a legitimate political choice. People could agree or disagree, but she chose deception instead. And deception always gets found out. A former Treasury official, speaking anonymously to the Financial Times, the tragedy is that some tax rises were probably necessary. But by lying about the scale of the problem, she's poisoned the well. Now, even when the government tells the truth, nobody will believe them. That's the real cost of this scandal. Not just Reeves' career, not just Starmer's credibility. It's trust itself. In living rooms and pubs, on factory floors and in office break rooms, people are reaching the same bitter conclusion. They're all the same, aren't they? Labour, Conservative, doesn't matter. They all lie. They all break promises. They all put their political survival ahead of the people they're supposed to serve. It's the most dangerous kind of disillusionment, because when people stop believing in the possibility of honest government, they stop engaging, they stop voting, they stop caring, or worse, they turn to extremes, to populists who promise to burn the whole system down. And Nigel Farage knows this. His poll numbers are climbing. Reform UK is gaining ground, because in the ashes of broken trust, he's offering something seductive. A complete rejection of the establishment that lied. He's on television again Tuesday evening, looking directly into the camera with that characteristic intensity. This is why people are sick of Westminster, he says. This is why they don't trust politicians. Because politicians like Rachel Reeves think they can say whatever they want to get elected, then do whatever they want once they're in power. Well, the British people deserve better. They deserve honesty. They deserve accountability. And they deserve a government that treats them like adults, not subjects to be manipulated. It's effective, dangerous, and partially true, because he's right about one thing. People do deserve better. By Wednesday morning, the first cracks appear in Labour's unity. 3 backbench MPs, all representing red wall constituencies. Labour won from the Conservatives issue a joint statement. We are deeply concerned by the revelations regarding the Chancellor's conduct. Trust between government and people is sacred. We urge the Prime Minister to take appropriate action to restore that trust. It's carefully worded. Doesn't explicitly call for resignation. But the message is clear. Do something, or we will. By Thursday, 2 more MPs join them. By Friday, the number has grown to 12. The rebellion is building, and in the background, Conservative Party strategists are already planning their next move. A vote of no confidence in the Chancellor, maybe even in the government itself. They won't win it. Labour has a massive majority, but they'll force every single Labour MP to publicly defend Reeves, to go on the record backing a Chancellor accused of lying, and every one of those votes will be ammunition in the next election. Did you know your MP voted to support a Chancellor who lied about the budget? It's devastating, and it's coming. Meanwhile, in Rachel Reeves' constituency office in Leeds, the staff are overwhelmed. Hundreds of emails, dozens of angry phone calls, some constituents demanding she resign, others defending her, arguing she's being scapegoated by a hostile media, but even her supporters sound tired, defensive, like they're trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. One elderly man who's voted Labour his entire life tells a staffer, "I want to believe her. I really do. But I saw those Ober documents. I read the timeline, and I don't know anymore." That's the epitaph right there. I just don't know anymore. 3 weeks later, Sir Laurie Magnus delivers his report. It's 53 pages long, meticulously sourced, devastating in its conclusions. It is my finding that the Chancellor of the Exchequer did breach paragraph 1.6 of the Ministerial Code by providing information to Parliament and the public that was inconsistent with forecasts she had received from the Office for Budget Responsibility. While I accept the Chancellor's assertion that she acted in what she believed to be the national interest, the Ministerial Code requires accuracy and transparency regardless of intent. The word breach is all that matters. Within 90 minutes, Rachel Reeves announces her resignation. She stands outside number 11, her face composed but her eyes hollow. "I have always sought to serve this country with integrity," she says, her voice steady. "While I do not accept all the conclusions of the independent advisor's report, I recognize that I have lost the confidence necessary to continue in this role. I have therefore tendered my resignation to the Prime Minister, effective immediately." She turns and walks back inside, and the door closes with a finality that feels like the end of something bigger than just one political career. Sir Keir Starmer survives. Barely. He appoints a new Chancellor, makes a contrite speech about learning from mistakes, promises renewed commitment to transparency, but the damage lingers. Labour's poll numbers drop. Not catastrophically, but enough to matter. Enough to make the next election suddenly look competitive again, and in homes across Britain, people remember. They remember the promise, the betrayal, the lie. They remember how it felt to believe, and how it felt to be deceived. Some will forgive eventually, some will forget, but most will simply add this to the long list of reasons why they no longer trust politicians. And on cold December nights, when the news shows yet another scandal, yet another broken promise, yet another politician caught in another lie, they'll think back to this moment. To Rachel Reeves and the black hole that never was. To the £30 billion taken from working people based on a deception. To the day they learned, once again, that the people in power will say anything to stay there. It's not anger they feel anymore. It's something sadder. Resignation. The quiet acceptance that this is just how it is, how it's always been, how it always will be. And perhaps that's the real tragedy of the Reeves scandal. Not that a politician lied, but that when she was caught, the nation barely felt surprise, just a weary, familiar ache of broken trust. Again.